Schönen guten Abend.
Good evening and welcome to the OSCE Security Days. It's nice to see so many of you tonight. Despite the hot temperatures, it's 31 degrees today, unusual in this region, so we did not cherish too many illusions. Today there are no important matches going on in the championship.
Der deutschen OSZE-Präsidentschaft ist fast Der deutsche Außenminister Frank-Walter Steinmeier sagte bei seinem
Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier said, "I remember expectations are great in stormy times. Nobody can tell how and what can be achieved." He really had quite some respect of his office. Stormy times, what did he refer to? The Ukraine crisis is not yet solved. The Russian neighboring states of Russia are afraid of the big neighbor. Europe is the aim of many refugees.
Das Mittelmeer ist derzeit ein Massengrab für Verzweifelte geworden.
Terrorists have declared war on us and carry war into our cities. And the financial crisis seems to be contained but not yet over. However, we have to say also we do not have to draw a gloomy picture either. Sometimes I have the feeling that too many events take place at the same time, and due to the live screenings, we sometimes paint a gloomier picture of the world than the reality is. Those who think positively want to act. And this is the aim of today's discussion. But coordinations are required, and partners have to be found, new ways have to be chosen. This is the way I understand the theme of this evening: less confrontation, more cooperation. How can we build a free society that is safe nevertheless? That's what we want to debate about tonight. We will hear several speeches. First of all, the host, Lamberto Zanier, will speak, the General Secretary of OSCE, to be followed by Hans-Gerd Pöttering, the Chairman of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. He worked in the European Parliament for many years, President for many years. Both gentlemen are really ardent Europeans, and originally we planned to have the Federal Minister of Defense to speak here. But in the Parliament there are some important decisions. The extension of the mandate, for instance, it is not, of course, appropriate to have no Minister of Defense in such an important discussion, but she sent the parliamentarian state secretary who will deliver a speech. First of all, I would like to invite Mr. Zanier to take the floor now.
Good evening, everybody. I apologize, I speak in English, but if I try to speak in German, you may not understand me, so perhaps it's safer if I do it this way. Let me first of all thank the hosts of this event, the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. We worked with them and the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung to organize this Security Day. And I would like to thank the high-level speakers who join us for the panel tonight. 2 words on the Security Days. It's a concept that we have developed, that I've invested on personally at a time when we have divisions in the organization, and these divisions make it complicated for us even to adopt an agenda of a meeting. So I decided at some point, good, there are some very difficult issues to discuss on the agenda. I will put them on the agenda, I will organize the event, and whoever wants to come is welcome for a discussion. Of course, everybody's curious, so everybody's coming, in fact. And so these Security Days have taken their own life, and they've become a space for discussion in an intergovernmental mode, but not on the record. But in a way that allows us also to touch some complicated issues, as will be the case with this Security Day this time. As I say, we are at a time of divisions. We see a return of geopolitics in Europe. We're at a time when we see discussions on the sanctions as a result, of course, of the annexation of Crimea, the conflict in eastern Ukraine. Today, it's a big day for the European Union with the vote on Brexit. There's a NATO summit coming up. These events are showing how complex is the world we're living in and what divisive issues we have on the agenda. So in this polarized world, it is in a way easier to sit on one side of the problem and pointing the finger against the other side. So we have a lot of difficult debates, not always constructive debates. It is very difficult, and it's unfortunately unpopular, to try to sit in the middle and say, while recognizing there are problems, but say we need to keep talking. After all, the CSC was created as a tool for dialogue between East and West at a time when East and Westers were seeing each other as enemies. So now I'm not saying that we are in that mode, but certainly we have serious problems on the agenda. So as there is, how can I say, a robust interaction between the various players, somewhere there has to be also space for engagement. And that's the spirit of this meeting. And I would like to thank also the German chairmanship of the OSCE for supporting us and me personally also in this role. 2 words, and literally 2 words on this night owl session. This is a continuation of a debate that has started some time ago in the OSCE, and in fact it's a debate that is there in many ways. It's a debate about security today. Security is very difficult to define in this moment. We spoke about geopolitics and the East-West, in a way, angle that is re-emerging, but we see also the larger global threats. We have seen, unfortunately, a wave of terrorist attacks. There's the big debate on refugees and migrants and what's behind that, what is happening in our societies, and then the increasing polarization, the impact of organized crime, and what have you, from climate change to the larger issues related to sustainable development. Some of these issues, and especially if we focus on the terrorist threat or challenge, we see an attack to the core values that we pride ourselves on having developed and worked for over time. And in fact, as we feel that having developed how can I say, a democratic, transparent system with a strong rule of law and all that, we see the terrorists attack us using those values that we have as weaknesses in a way. And this is creating, of course, reactions. It's creating reactions within our societies. It is creating reactions also in the debate within the group of countries that we bring together, because we see different countries reacting differently. Where do we set the line between security and protecting the people, but also, on the other hand, defending the values and defending the principles that are the basis of our democratic system. So this is a very fundamental challenge. I think, and I personally think it's important to keep the moral high ground in this fight, but obviously we cannot underestimate also the challenges of the attack to what we stand for. So this is a difficult debate, and it's a debate for which we have some great speakers tonight, but it's a debate in the spirit of a security day to which I hope all of you will also participate and contribute. Thank you very much from my side. I'm looking forward to the event, and I would like now to pass the floor to Mr. Pöttering for the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. Thank you very much.
Mr. Zanier, as you all will know, or as you may not know, is an Italian, and therefore I say, Caro Segretario Generale Lamberto Zanier, Commissioner Hahn, Mrs. Licht, State Minister Link, ladies and gentlemen. In the history of Europe, and especially in the history of Germany, There has always been a conflict between collective security and individual freedom. The freedom of the individual far too often came under the control of the state. The failures of our history today provide us with a framework we must never exceed or go beyond, even though threats might be excessive. Given the acts of terrorism, a defensible democracy must act against the enemies of democracy. For this end, we need acting institutions which will eventually defend peace in Germany, in the European Union, and in Europe at large, as well as in the world. More security is not a contradiction to freedom. The individual freedom is especially characterized by the feeling that personal security must be guaranteed. Open borders within the European Union can only be imagined, provided that we can protect our direct neighborhood. It's not only since the refugee crisis we know that we have to stabilize our external frontiers in order to preserve the stability within. I think this will be one of the major challenges in the years and months to come, and I hope that Great Britain will take a decision today, making a contribution to the fact that Great Britain will remain part of these efforts. I'm happy about your audience because of our common cause, because this is an encouragement to look ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not only since the refugee crisis that we have to contribute to stability. The risks and challenges can only be managed by means of network security. National armies are overtaxed here, and I may also say incidentally that from 1984 to 1994 I was the chairman of the Subcommittee for Security and Disarmament in the European Parliament, and at that time when we established this subcommittee, some people were smiling at us, but I always felt that a strong European community and the European Union of today needs a strong defense and stability policy. Security and defense must be seen as a common European mission and must be defended as such. For European security and thereby for our freedom, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe is of great importance indeed. Its foundation as a Conference for Security and Cooperation in Europe some 40 years ago was a symbol of disarmament and detente in the middle of the Cold War. Cooperation and mutual information contributed considerably to an early detection of crises among the CSCE member states. After the Cold War, when the organization was renamed OSCE, turned out a stabilizing factor, especially in Central and Eastern Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, the fortunate development of Europe and the tragic exception were the atrocities during the Balkan conflict in the 1990s. This is what we forget too often. We say there has been peace in Europe all the time, but not always, because we have established a common community of peace and values, but this was not always the case outside of the Union. The political scientist Francis Yokohama proclaimed the aim of history. I would like to be modest with my criticism, which was a formulation that has been refuted by the events of history. As long as there are people on earth, there will be history, because people, for good or worse, are continuing to act, leading to confrontations. Many people in Europe felt on an island of the blessed, far away from the conflicts and difficulties in the world, especially for us in Germany, who we have lived in peace with our neighbors for 2 generations, especially here in Berlin, close to the Brandenburg Gate, where so many good things, but also negative things and evil things have happened. The recent developments demonstrate that this peace can only be preserved if it is fought for again and again. This is only possible if we do not turn away from the world, but if we approach the world. Europe's capability, its potential, and its political, cultural, and geographic prerequisites are a gift for us, the Europeans, which we have developed more and more over the decades. When we think about Europe in the context of the world's history, and we should here speak about the European Union, although it is not the whole of Europe, it does not mean that economic weakness is our concern. But to think about greater efforts should raise the question to open up and to exhaust all our potentials. Ladies and gentlemen, in the Ukraine, following the Russian aggression, we have seen the fragility of European peace in a special way. The OSCE was mainly one of the only means to react. Its supporters were trying to defend the ideals of Europe together. We all can remember the dramatic days of the hostage-taking of OSCE members in eastern Ukraine 2 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, for our efforts day after day, these people who are working within the OSCE deserve our expressed thanks and gratitude. And that's what I'm saying in the presence of the General Secretary. Outside of the OSCE, a dialogue with Russia at times had become difficult. Within the bodies of the OSCE, however, there were still channels open, so that with the help of the OSCE, at least, a limitation of violence had become possible. The conflict in the Ukraine, as we have seen, cannot be solved by military ways, but only by means of political ways. For this purpose, mechanisms of conflict management the OSCE offers are indispensable. They can and have to contribute to the adherence to the Minsk agreements. And I expressly say on behalf of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, which is also my deep personal opinion, we do not only want partnership, but possibly also friendship with Russia. Security on our continent in the 21st century will also depend on how the European Union will react, how strong it will be, and how Russia can also take advantage of its strengths. But we also have to say clearly, this partnership makes it necessary that the European and international law is not violated. And we call on all participants, including Russia, to comply with the agreements of Minsk so that our partnership and friendship with Russia can be further developed. Ladies and gentlemen, these mechanisms are necessary and required in the international security policy so that individual freedoms can be preserved in the long run. This is the topic of this year's OSCE Security Days, from confrontation to cooperation. The stress on cooperation for us as a political foundation is of extraordinary importance. Together and along with the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, was immediately prepared to organize this joint event. We are happy to welcome you all in Berlin tonight. Berlin was chosen as a venue because Berlin holds the chairmanship within the OSCE this year. This is a great responsibility we have to live up to in our society at a time when Germany has to adjust its role to the international situation. Our international and European partners expect a stronger commitment of Germany with regard to prevention, crisis management and transformation of conflicts. Here, Germany and its chairmanship in the OSCE can make a major contribution. In the 2014 OSCE conference, Defense Minister Ursula von der Leyen stressed the importance of Germany's action with the words, indifference is no option for a country like Germany. This responsibility is especially important when it comes to events on the European continent. But not only Germany will play the decisive role alone. What is much more important is to provide a scope of action where the European nations can coordinate their activities more effectively. Within the European Union and within NATO, mechanisms of cooperation have been built already, but they need to be improved in the future. Challenges are changing, and we have to respond decisively and have to find good answers. Even outside of the EU and NATO, we see a greater need for action. I do not want to dwell on all details. General Secretary, you are much more generous with the time limits. When I was the chairman of the parliamentary group, I had a maximum of 6 minutes. And there was an older colleague from Luxembourg who had only 1 minute and who asked me for 2 minutes for the sake of justice. So 10 minutes is just a generous solution. So the OSCE in this forum is an opportunity to build and to strengthen trust. Trust, ladies and gentlemen, is the decisive factor in Europe and in the world. When trust is lost, it always takes a long time to regain it. Let us use the coming 2 days of this year's OSCE Security Days, therefore, in order to strengthen trust and cooperation. And now this is the final statement, which I have to vary because I originally would have asked the Defense Minister von der Leyen to take the floor, but she has to be in the Bundestag today, as Lamberto Zanier said, because the defense minister has to be present when it comes to the mandate of Germany. But we are happy to have the parliamentary state secretary in the Federal Ministry of Defense, Ralf Brauchsiebel, here. And now, Ralf Brauchsiebel, State Secretary, I would like to ask you now to speak to us. And ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung as well, there is a rare opportunity for the chairman of an Adenauer Foundation to do so. I have the right and the pleasure today to welcome you on behalf of both foundations.
Thank you very much, dear Chairman Hans-Gert Pöttering. I'm familiar with that foundation since I got a scholarship from them, so I was not so much familiar with the Ebert Foundation, but I wholeheartedly thank both foundations for hosting this meeting. Secretary General Zanier, it's a pleasure to see you here in Germany on the occasion of the first OSCE Security Days hosted in Berlin, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you all here. My staffers told me that I was supposed to speak in English as good as I can. I'm a little bit confused because my impression was that the language that my friend Hans-Gert Pöttering used was German. But since I was told to speak in English, I beg your pardon if I try to continue in English. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Brandenburg Gate is certainly the perfect place to discuss tonight's topic. It is, as Hans-Gert Pöttering already indicated, it is a symbol of freedom and peace, trust and unity. At this place, people were cheering when the Berlin Wall came down, celebrating the fall of the Iron Curtain and the reunification of Germany. And we and all those who were there and who can remember will never forget these moments of pure joy that we lived to see here in Berlin. And mainly today, as our unified Europe of common values and open borders is threatened by internal fragmentation and division, the UK is holding the referendum tonight. Terror continues to hit us right to the core, such as those attacks in Paris, Istanbul and Brussels. Hybrid warfare is being used for power politics in Europe, and the largest refugee movement since the Second World War confronts us with globalization in a way we were not prepared for. Ladies and gentlemen, today our fundamental freedoms in the OSCE area are challenged to the utmost. But I also have some more optimistic thoughts to share with you. Because we do have the OSCE, we do not have to establish it first. And the relevance of the OSCE cannot be overstated, especially in today's time. Its principles are key to renewing dialogue, rebuilding trust, and restoring security, which is the motto of the German OSCE chairmanship. Chairmanship, sorry. German championship, I said, oh. Last year I had the chance to take part in the German-Brazil government negotiations in Brasilia, and the Foreign Office was in charge of the preparation of the meetings, and there was one advice that the Foreign Office gave to all the ministers and state secretaries. They said, do not start talking about football with your Brazilian counterpart. Just react if they start. And we all stuck to that rule. So transparency and confidence building are central to a modern and forward-looking security policy. They help prevent escalation, and they are instrumental in building lasting peace. There are principles and rules we developed in cooperation. We need to demand respect for those rules time and again. We need to keep striving for it, patiently and steadfast. Of course, it is not enough to demand respect where there is civil war, where terrorists randomly murder innocent people, where ruthless means are used to destabilize entire states, to blur the line between war and peace. But in these cases, ladies and gentlemen, there will always be a need for additional measures, which can be economic sanctions, which can be a powerful weapon, the power of security and deterrence capabilities, and, if necessary, the responsibility to protect vulnerable groups, of course in accordance with international law and mandated by the United Nations. But also in these cases, the OSCE and its rules basically provide us with a framework. Confidence building and transparency have a preventive function. They create objectivity, and they protect our core values. They protect our freedom. Being free to choose our cooperation and trading partners, being free to speak our minds and respect opinions that differ from ours, being free to choose whom or what to believe in, and to freely choose the way we want to live. And also being free to enjoy fair political participation as supported by OSCE and ODIHR. The American President Roosevelt demanded in his Four Freedoms Address in 1941 that freedom also includes being free from fear. We must not allow the fear of war and terrorism to become one with a fear of what is foreign to us. We must not allow the seeds of mistrust and hatred to be sown amongst us. We must not allow for unjustified links to be made between Islam and terrorism, between migrants and crime, between the Western world and decadence. And the OSCE is the right forum to address these challenges, ladies and gentlemen. It is the central forum for communication. So how can we make better use of it and make it stronger in these times of crises? First of all, we need to let it keep us up with the times. It is particularly due to my experience as Parliamentary State Secretary of the Minister of Defense that I am aware of the great importance of verification measures. I am aware of the great expertise and skill of the inspectors that work for the OSCE. Hans-Gert Pöttering already mentioned. We were able to witness that shortly after the leadership of the Defense Ministry took office in spring 2014, that the German colonel and his team members from our Bundeswehr Verification Center were kidnapped in Ukraine. For 8 long days, they were hostages of pro-Russian separatists. I will never forget when this colonel, who was unbearably presented in public, was strong enough to say, "We are guests of the mayor." Everyone was aware they were kept as hostages, but he said, "We are the guests of the mayor of this city, and we expect to be treated like guests." And they had to wait for 8 days before they were freed. And it was impressive to see how wise and calm they were despite the exertion. Back then, we experienced firsthand how valuable and meaningful the work of the OSCE inspectors is. They provide us with a military situation picture which is changing rapidly due to technological developments. This is invaluable in times as chaotic as these. Ladies and gentlemen, this is also why I advocate the further development of the Vienna document on confidence and security building measures in Europe, and its continuous adaptation to the changing situation. I also advocate that the OSCE create an even tighter network with other organizations that make up our security architecture in a broader sense. First and foremost, of course, with EU and NATO. NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg announced that a NATO liaison office will be re-established at the OSCE in Vienna this year. And the Minister of Defense has decided that Germany will offer to provide an officer for this liaison officer. This Lieutenant Colonel is almost ready to report for duty. With our national contribution, we want to improve the coordination between Brussels and Vienna, and thus strengthening the OSCE as the forum for dialogue. When it comes to the European Union, I also think it will make sense to cooperate more closely. In doing so, we can build on the hands-on experience of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission in Ukraine. It is also of great importance that we provide every support to the missions and negotiating formats of the OSCE, be it in Nagorno-Karabakh, Transnistria, or Georgia. That rings particularly true for the mission in Ukraine. Every day, ladies and gentlemen, many observers do their incredibly valuable work there, while conditions remain most difficult. The Bundeswehr will continue to support the mission with personnel, technical measures, and with training, because particularly in this gridlocked conflict, it is vital to provide the framework for the implementation of the Minsk Protocol. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very fortunate to have the OSCE in these times of crisis. At the end of the day, security and freedom both go hand in hand, as expressed in the title of today's event. They depend on each other, because only by protecting these two values we can make human dignity the yardstick of our policies. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the major lesson we learned from the catastrophes of the last century. This is what the rules of the OSCE have represented for decades. This is what we will strive for during our German chairmanship. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Vielen Dank für die Rede.
Thank you very much for the speech. We thought that we allow a couple of questions from the audience. If you would like to respond or if you have a question, you are welcome. We'll come around with a microphone. All questions are answered. There's one. Good evening. Sorry, I have a laptop on my knee, so I cannot stand up. I'm sorry. My name is Amin. I come from the Compact magazine. I have a question on the relations with Russia, which you have also mentioned. There are warning words from the coalition partners not to further escalate the relations by deploying troops near the border, plus maneuvers, and even Jacquet at the Atlantic Council made a similar statement because he at least was the defense minister of the USA. What is your position, or what is the position of your institution?
May I answer at once? Well, I must admit, I cannot imagine anybody in Germany who's interested in increasing a conflict with Russia. No one is. And no one in the defense ministry is interested in doing so. But what has been agreed upon in NATO, as you probably know, is always the result of an agreement of the 28. And within the different member states, this is always the result of a democratic process. So it was the decision of the whole German government that has been agreed upon on NATO level. So there was no disagreement concerning the training in Eastern Europe, and it is our strong conviction that it is good to make very clear to our partners in the eastern countries of the alliance that they can rely on us. And this is a political message, of course, but this also implies training as it is exercised very openly, very transparently. And so this is something that I think I can say on behalf of the whole German government, because this was the decision of the whole government. The Minister of Defense is not alone on NATO level. It is not even in the forefront when decisions are taken. These are always our friends from the Foreign Office.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Денис Денищенко, я из Украины, Луганская область.
Good evening. My name is Demis Belic. I come from the Ukraine, from the Lugansk region.
Это на данный момент оккупированный город.
I come from the town of Luhansk, which is an occupied town.
Уже 2 года и 12 дней я не был дома.
For 2 years and 5 days, I have never been at home.
Большое спасибо фонду Конрада Адунара, что пригласили нас в Германию, и у меня есть возможность выступить и сказать вам свое мнение о том, что происходит в Украине.
I would like to thank the Konrad Adenauer Foundation for the invitation to come to Germany and for the opportunity to say a few words.
Я являлся участником АТО и имел непосредственное участие в конфликте.
I was a participant in the so-called anti-terroristic organization in the east of the Ukraine.
меня вопрос.
And now my question.
Просто хотелось бы для начала, чтобы люди понимали, кто его задает.
I just wanted to be understood as a person who asked this question.
Насколько украинский народ и Украина может рассчитывать на поддержку международного сообщества в данном конфликте?
My question is, in how far can the Ukraine and the Ukrainian people expect the support of the international community?
Это война, которую ведет Российская Федерация, и все это должны понимать.
We are confronted with a war, and this war is waged by the Russian Federation. Everybody has to understand this.
Поэтому мы рассчитываем на поддержку международного сообщества.
And during the recent months, more than 9,000 persons were killed in this war. More than 30,000 people were wounded. Therefore, we expect or we reckon with the support of the international community.
We are completely aware of the situation in East Ukraine. There is no doubt about it, and there is no doubt, and this has been made clear by all the members of the German government, that the illegal annexation of Crimea carried out by Russia has created an ongoing crisis in Europe. And we as Germans, together with our partners in EU and NATO, and I think the broad majority of countries in the OSCE, is on the side of Ukraine. We have always made clear that there is no military solution for the conflict, but we give economic and political support, and it is my strong conviction. We need patience and we need credibility. We need a very clear position towards what has happened. And indeed, we need patience and credibility. Chancellor Merkel has often reminded us that the Berlin Wall that I talked about, that Hans-Gert Pöttering talked about, stood here for 28 years. The illegal annexation of Crimea has happened 2 years ago. We know it is a tragedy, and it was illegal. But it was necessary to have patience before the Berlin Wall came down, and it will be necessary to have patience with regard to Ukraine. And it is my strong conviction, or let me use different words. During the Munich Security Conference, President Poroshenko was asked what is his explanation to the fact that 25 years ago, the Eastern European countries and the former states of the Soviet Union were more or less economically on the same level, and that since then, Poland and others have developed 6 times more than Ukraine. And President Poroshenko admitted, yes, we lost many chances for economic development in Ukraine. And I am convinced, if Ukraine uses the chances for economic development, with the support of the international community, and there is a lot of economic support, and if Ukraine uses this chance to develop an effective and efficient economy and bring economic progress and wealth to the vast majority of people, not just for the elites, but for the vast majority of people, if this works, this will have clear influence on the territories which are not under the control of the Ukraine government. Sooner or later, the question of the legitimacy of what has happened east of the borders that the Ukraine government can control, the question will arouse. And so there is a chance, by peaceful economic development and progress, to have an influence also on the other parts of Ukraine. And so this is something that we can offer. We can offer help for that. Many chances have been lost, have not been used in the past 25 years. And we are ready to be of help in order to use the chances which which are going to come. And this is what we can offer, and I think it should not be underestimated that there are these offers, especially by the European Union, but also by NATO and by OSCE.
Danke, Herr Staatssekretär. Wir haben jetzt mittlerweile
Thank you, State Secretary. We are now a bit behind our schedule because we have an interesting panel before us.
und vielen Dank auch.
Thank you very much indeed.
So, wir haben jetzt eine Panel.
So now we are going to have a panel discussion.
Ja, also vielen Dank.
Thank you very much.
Wir wollen jetzt noch ein bisschen diskutieren mit
Let us now have a short discussion. I have three persons who are highly competent on our subject of tonight. Next to me I have Sonja Licht, a recognized international sociologist and human rights activist. During the Yugoslav war, she was very active and worked for the civil society. For 12 years, she worked for the Open Society Fund, more than $100 million she collected. Today, she is the chairperson for the Council for External Relations of the Foreign Ministry. And in Serbia, she is one of the most influential women, not as a political influential woman. She's not a politician, she told me. So we have got somebody here who knows much about human rights issues. And I also would like to introduce to you Johannes Hahn, for many years manager in the industry. Now he has become a politician in Austria. He equipped himself for this position, and then he worked as the federal minister in Vienna. He's now the U.S. The commissioner for enlargement. This is really not an easy job. It is said that he is to support the countries in the pre-accession phase in the field of the rule of law. When I think of Turkey, I think this means is quite a challenge. There seems to be much work. And I have Georg Link, the director of the ODIHR in short, in the office in Warsaw. He's responsible for democratic organizations and human rights. And you send observers, election observers in times of elections. And given the crisis in Europe, he also has a lot of work to do. That's why we have started this panel immediately, because these two gentlemen have to leave us earlier, while you are asked to join us for a reception upstairs on the 5th floor. Georg Link is a liberal and the state minister in the Foreign Office. He's a diplomat and who uses clear words nevertheless. If I may ask you about the speech delivered by the state minister, let's start with the lady. What is your response? Was there anything new in his speech? You can take this microphone or yours.
Well, first of all, I wish you all a good evening, and thank you for coming on such a beautiful evening to be here with us. I hope that we will, meet at least part of your expectation. I was very, very glad that the state minister underlined a number of issues that OSCE can do, which in fact refer, in my understanding, in my language, to something that is being lately quite ignored when we talk about security challenges and the responses. And this is the participation of citizens. This is the role of civil society. In fact, I was informed, and many other people were, that the new EU security strategy Contrary to the one, it is still under preparation. It is not an open document, but there is already a wide discussion about it. And contrary to the one from 2003 that was led by Javier Solana, this one, in fact, is not going to mention, as far as things are now, human security. And it seems that the entire attitude, the entire approach is changing toward hard security, which in many ways is understandable, but then we are really coming to the main issue of this conference. How will we, in fact, make sure that human rights and civic activism will be part of every serious security approach? I personally do not believe that it is possible to have real stability and security without a very serious attention and institutions that are paying attention to full respect of human rights and individual freedom. And I'm talking as the only person from the Balkans in this conference. By the way, I think it should be more than me, not because I think that Balkans is the center of the world, but because we are a European post-conflict region. We know all the challenges of the 90s, and I do not dare to say, I do not dare even to think about the sentence that is so often mentioned these days, even within the region, when some of the people, for example, from Macedonia tell us in Serbia, welcome to your future. Unfortunately, the Balkan conflict had many features that I think, and many lessons, that I think is still not late to think about, including this very day, the day of the referenda. I must tell you, when I was listening to the arguments, I had an intuitive fear because I heard the same language, the same emotional response to something which is not, shouldn't be based on emotions, but on a very rational decision. So what I heard from the State Secretary, in fact, is in fact underlining what I believe OSCE can do. Take in account very seriously what the citizens can do and have to do in order to make our region, our Europe, and the world a more secure place.
Vielen Dank. Jetzt möchte ich gerne mal den Herrn Link.
Now I would like to ask Mr. Link more commitment of the Germans, more military commitment. Did I get this correctly? I thought Ralf Braukwerker said the Bundeswehr is able to do what OSCE can do. Observation. He mentioned the example of a commander who is involved in the mission, not military action as an end in itself, but to make use of the tools of the OSCE because they have tools to try to prevent crisis, and once the crisis is there, to handle it. But it requires the goodwill of all parties to allow for it. Secretary General mentioned some of these tools. For instance, SMM was mentioned, but they can only do the job when they are allowed to go there without being threats, without being shot at. So we have the tools. Let us not belittle the organizations we have, but let's use these tools in good faith. And Mrs. Licht said, well, security doesn't exist without human rights. I mean, I do not underline it ex officio, but because it is a very clear thing, the security notion of the OSCE is much bigger than of other organizations. It is military security, it's cooperation, but it's also sustainable respect of human rights. So there is no security and stability without respect for human rights. Thank you. Now it's your turn to say something to the keynote speech. I would say he precisely described the task ahead of us. As I see things on the Balkans with the accession countries or the eastern or southern neighborhood, what needs to be done is to stabilize this situation, and stabilization is only possible by promoting economic development to give hope to the people. But economic development can only be promoted if the tools, legal tools, are available and are being used. An international investor will only invest in a country if there is an independent legal system there, if there are legal structures in place. And here I think the two aspects, economic development and the pushing of the principles of rule of law, come together. In a country where there is no rule of law tradition, I mean, I cannot just impose it by on those who have been in power for many years and have benefited from the non-existence. So I have to get a lever. This lever is the economic development. I mean, there is a pressure on people if there is a lot of unemployment in a country. And this allows you to exercise pressure. And to do this, we need the civil society, a civil society that is prepared to get involved, to take on political responsibility, and to get involved. It is indispensable also for the civil society to participate. Let's take the issue of Turkey. We need Turkey at the moment, but I also read that Erdogan thinks about a referendum and to suspend negotiations. How difficult is it to get a country like Turkey on board and to discuss human rights? The most important thing is not to lose your nerve. Well, you know, geography is destiny. Turkey is our neighbor, an important neighbor and a strategic partner. We have to deal with Turkey, to cooperate with it, and I think we have to do it in a professional way. And this also includes that I'm not controlled by rhetorics. We have an agreement with Turkey and the ministerial level. It is implemented correctly, but of course, rhetorics and different ways of acting are not helpful to establish trust in rule of law. Or how shall I put it? well, it's not indicative for the rule of law which we need. I mean, rule of law, it cannot be negotiated. It needs to be implemented. So there is no room for maneuver. And I think our Turkish friends are also aware of it. It's up to them to make the decision. I know many Turks who take a great interest in getting the rule of law we have here. We are aware of the difficult situation, but I think Europe, and especially Germany, has made experience with terrorist challenges, and we have always found a way to give a successful answer within the rule of law. So the Europeans and the Germans are a good example that you can stick to your principles, but nevertheless arrive at solutions. Well, we Germans are pleased to hear it. Nevertheless, the UK, France, Turkey, there we had a lot of terrorist attacks, reduced civil rights, more policing is often demanded. Is it a solution? It cannot be the sole solution. The more often these tools are being used in an uncontrolled way, there will also be the danger of exaggeration. We must not forget that security is a task for the state. Freedom is a right. So freedom a right and security a task. So all the measures, the storage of data, we always have to look where the limits lies. And the European Court of Justice has often shown us where the limit is. I mean, more is not better, but when measures are taken, they must be restricted, be it in time or controlled by the parliament. When we do everything that is possible in the field of security and define rights of freedom as the counterpiece, then it will get us nowhere. They belong together. Sometimes when we make comments to national laws, we always say, when you develop security laws, then do it on the basis of civil rights. So those who want to have a tight control, they always quote citizens who are afraid. And it's a phenomenon not only in Germany, but also in France and Austria and the United States, that people feel no longer secure. Is it only a feeling, or has life become more insecure here?
Well, I don't think it is one can answer with an either-or answer to this question. People are afraid because there are many challenges to their security, but on the other hand, we know that people are afraid of the unknown. So where are those who are afraid of the migrants? Usually in the places where they almost never met a migrant. But they know already that this other one that they don't know is a very dangerous person or a dangerous group of people and so on. I do believe that involvement into processes, public dialogues, on, for example, integration of migrants, or if you want, integration of the Roma, reintegration of the Roma that are being sent back from Germany to the Balkans is an issue that needs to be really on the public agenda. We need people to understand that this other can be their partner if they work together. It is not an easy task, but for example, when I'm thinking of the Balkan route last summer, and I'm thinking of what happened in my own country, Serbia, just before it happened, if you would ask anybody what is going to happen in a country that is not exactly known as the most Muslim-loving space in the world, if 600,000 people will go through, what will be the response of the citizens? You would hear very, very worrying predictions. Not one single major incident happened during those few months. Why? Because on one hand, there was a good political narrative coming from the top, and that I think was a very, very important fact, but there was also something else. Thousands and thousands of citizens, as here, it was also the case in Serbia and in a number of other countries, including Hungary, that at the point no one talks about those part of the Hungarian responses. Thousands of citizens who were there to support the refugees, to help them, and in fact to get into a debate with them. This is not reported. I see it on a daily basis. And this is which I think is giving us hope that it is possible to overcome the fear if there is a real synergy coming from top and down and from bottom up.
Eine richtige Menschenrechtlerin.
Well, a real human rights activist. So you ask her a question and she says what she feels she has to say. Well, time is not on our side, but I have got a question I'm interested in. Well, if the alliance defeats IS, are we more secure here, or will things only start here? I'm not a security expert, but the threat situation has changed, leading to this general feeling of insecurity, because something may happen everywhere. So whenever people come together, they may be a target, but I think we just need to be more self-confident. The challenge for politicians is, I mean, normally I say the citizen wants to do what he wants to do, but in an environment of highest security. Well, and this is why I say we have to be very careful to suspend civic rights. I'm aware that it may become necessary, but you have to be very careful not to make something like this permanent, or that you get used to being eavesdropped or to be surveyed everywhere. We do not want this, and I do hope we will not need it. So we also have to stand together, but this also means, if necessary, we have to stand up to raise our voices. My feeling is often there is a silent majority in Europe, but we have to stand up also against populists who think they have simple answers, and when you ask a second question, they cannot answer it. So we need moral courage, and we have to say we need European cooperation in order to counter the terror danger in Europe and outside. Well, terror is international in nature, and it requires an international response, but in an adequate way that takes into consideration all our achievements, rule of law, may I also get your take on it? I think I completely agree. When it comes to the IS, the question is, well, how do you define victory? Or let me put it this way, if the IS can be pushed back so that it has no own territory any longer, the danger is even higher that people come back. But I think we have to be aware, we have to fight it consciously, but this doesn't mean that we have a general suspicion of all refugees, as it is being done by populist parties at the moment. This poses a huge danger, and we should also see the opportunity. Germany, in its history, received migrants, ethnic Germans, and the country was enriched. It makes me angry just to see this as a threat and not as an opportunity. Let us develop a reasonable migration law. We should see also the opportunities and not have a general suspicion. The concern that is expressed towards Muslims goes in the wrong direction. If we do this, we fall for the terrorists. The overwhelming majority of the Muslims is as much affected by terror. They are fleeing this terror from Syria. They are fleeing also from the barrel bombs of Assad, but also of the IS. So let's fight this terror together with the Muslim community, and let's stand up against any right-wing or left-wing populists.
Well, of course, the populists also succeed in portraying things in such a way as to find a feeling among the people as if the refugee policy has not been dealt with correctly or successfully. Well, Mrs. Litsch said this has to be explained well to the people and then everything will all right. Is that enough to do?
But, sorry. Of course it is not. I mean, communication within society is extremely important, but it is not enough. It depends also very much on the media. It depends on educational institutions. It depends on the level of mobilization. I fully agree with Commissioner Hahn of the silent majority. When I again go back to the Balkans, the silent majority was not a warmongering majority, but it was silent. It did not react enough, or it did not react in time. I can't say that I have the answer to all the dilemmas, but it is obvious that it is extremely important to use all the mechanisms for, at least for me, it is quite obvious, in mobilizing the people against the dangerous narrative of the dangerous populists. We also have to, there are populisms and populisms. It is important to kind of try to diversify and understand that some of them are really dangerous, some of them are spreading hate speech, xenophobic nationalism, etc., etc. It is very important not only to single them out, but to really try through all the means we have in our, so to say, in our toolbox to fight them, to expose them, to go into, to challenge them for public debate, because usually their reasoning is very, very poor and primitive. I do believe in the wisdom of people. I think that they know how to react if they are part of this debate. But there must be a serious debate.
Let me come back to your question from my point of view. Very often it is asked whether we, the Europeans, are we not able in our union to cope with the 2 million refugees? When you travel to the Lebanon or Jordan or the eastern part of Turkey, people there do not understand that we Europeans make such a fuss, that we create such a problem, while almost 50% of the people in the Lebanon are refugees. They have more Syrian school pupils than Lebanese children. They teach them in 3 shifts at schools because during this time they cannot provide enough schoolrooms. So this is a different kind of a challenge. The problem we had in Europe was that over a certain period of time, the citizens had the feeling that the governmental authorities are not in control of the situation. When you see pictures on television showing how refugees flow into countries and can overrun a barrier, and that the governmental authorities are not present, neither were they prepared for this immigration. I do not want to defend them. We were in an extraordinary situation which had not happened. It took a time before this situation could be controlled. I think when the people have the feeling that we have the situation under control, legally under control, then the preparedness of the people to absorb more immigrants is different. But if we create the impression that we are not controlling the situation, then we must not be surprised about the people's reaction. So I think the Austrians have opted for their own solution. Mrs. Licht wanted to add something else.
I just wanted to add that, in fact, what I think we again learned last summer is how dangerous it is when there is not enough thinking and action as a preventive action. Because let's be frank, it was clear that the refugees will come to Europe. I mean, they were coming to Greece for years and years, and somehow it seemed that we all forget that Greece is very close to us. As long as the Balkan route was opened, it seems to me that people in Germany and other places have forgotten how close the Balkans is to the EU. And then suddenly, the Corridor 10 becomes a European corridor, as it always was. And this is where I think it is high time for all of us to think in advance, to think about prevention and not only react when something happens.
Okay, danke schön.
Thank you very much. Now we have planned to allow some questions from the audience. If you feel encouraged to seize this opportunity, we just have to use the microphone. Good evening. I come from China, and I'm a victim of human rights violations in China. I'm a Buddhist. I would like to come back to the security in China. I think it is well known that China has signed an international security agreement, and this does not only refer to German companies or foundations. When the Chancellor visited China in July, she also talked about the issue of German companies in China. My question is for Mr. Georg Link. I think here the German companies can play a big role in China. They can do more for human rights and security. They have done a lot, but they can really do something in Germany and in Europe in order to do something for improving the situation in China under the Communist Party of China. What is the policy of Germany vis-à-vis China under the rule of the Communist Party of China? What does Germany expect? And secondly, how will the German companies and the German NGOs, what can they do more in Europe or in China in order to improve the human rights situation in China or to end the violation of human rights in China? Well, the OSCE is big, 55 states, North America, Canada, the USA, from the east as far as to Vladivostok, and it includes Mongolia. China is not part of it, and we are not working there. So it wouldn't be fair. I would use third parties' knowledge if I'd said something. This is one of the principles I adhere to in my work. I can say something about the work of these 57 states, but I am very much in favor of the human rights activities of our government in China. This is an issue I monitor quite attentively, but we are, of course, very much interested in these subjects within the 57 states of the OSCE. We address these issues regularly, and we are convinced that economic cooperation and human rights go together well, and that the best way to make investments is an act of human rights activities. Civil rights activities is the best way to do so, but I cannot say something actually about China itself. Well, perhaps you can keep your question short. Thank you very much for this extremely interesting round of discussion. I come from the Afghan embassy. As you know, many refugees come from my country to Europe. The number of refugees that have come to Germany and Europe, especially to Germany, over 75,000 of them. Most of them are young people from Afghanistan. The young people who have left their schools or universities. The question is, during the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan for 10 years, 46,000 Afghan people came to Germany. How come all of a sudden that within half a year over 175 people have come? What is the root cause? We have to think about the reasons why and how these young people are fleeing Afghanistan, and which country in the region are allowed to schools, to go to the madrasas, and are sent to Afghanistan to terrorize the people who are then forced to leave their countries and then become a big burden for Germany and Europe. So this is my question. Why the world public community closes their eyes, do not ask where do these people come from? This is my question. Who of the two gentlemen would like to react? I can not contribute much to this question. The UN Refugees Commissioner told me at the time when many refugees had arrived in Greece, also from Afghanistan, 50% of those refugees, that is 50% of the Afghan people who arrived in Greece, were born in Iran already. And they were not only babies. I think in Iran we have 1.5 to 3.5 million Afghan people. So you can ask the question why they are trying to come to Europe at a time when, after the positive outcome of talks, we might assume that the situation in Iran has improved. So obviously, there are other motivations behind. Let me repeat. I can only come back to economic cooperation with your country too, so that this is something which we want to favor more actively. Just recently, the week before last, in the Commission, we have brought out a communication about immigration, and the plan is that money should be spent here in order to support the economic development of those countries which are the main countries of origin of refugees. Refugees, well, are people on the one hand, but there are also migrants or young people who do not see any future, or sometimes the parents send their children hoping for them to get a solid education. And if we are able to address these questions in these countries, then little by little the situation can be improved. This cannot be done from one day to the next, but I think this is the only reasonable approach against the background of the migration movement of the recent years and what we will also see in the future. Well, let me add the following. With regard to the Vienna colleagues and with regard to Lombardo Zanier, so we are trying to provide help beyond the framework of the EU. The OSCE works very closely with Afghanistan. As you know, we observed this by the request of the UN. The same we do with Northern Africa, with Tunisia, etc. We are trying to help to overcome the crisis, the migration crisis. This is a debate which is not yet over in the OSCE, but we have understood the problem very much, and we would like to make use of the instruments we have at the OSCE, like prevention, early activities together with the civic society, because the flows of migration will continue. Even though some of the major conflicts in Syria or Libya are solved, a large number of migrants will continue to set out to Europe, and we will have to address these problems seriously. It will not help to close our eyes, and more people will be knocking at our doors. We have to get prepared for them to come. Thank you very much. Well, we can talk about everything except about the time limit. So there is only one question I should allow. Jochen Schmidt. Well, we have the political foundations as the organizers of this event. Political organizations are aiming at improving the civil society. And talking about Russia, countries like Russia, human rights or other issues are not adhered to. What about election observers? Your predecessor was tolerated in Russia, but he had big difficulties to achieve a number of things. How do you see the situation, considering the principle of a consensus? Because this is precisely the point. This triad is important. What about the role of the people? There's a good reason why people stress to intensify economic cooperation. Well, this serves some countries, but we also stress that the fundamental rights to be promoted. This is one of the tasks of the political foundations, by the way. Well, as far as the political foundations are concerned, I think more competent representatives are here who might want to answer this question afterwards. For us, it is clear that in accordance with the agreements of the OSCE, the Copenhagen document, etc., We are responsible for the observation of elections in the OSCE member states, and the countries have the obligation to invite for these monitoring activities. And we have constructive talks with the Russian Federation about elections. The invitation has been extended to us, and the preparations are in the pipeline. So I would not say anything else about things which are going on. About the election monitoring in general, I would say that this is one of the strongest instruments at all in the OSCE. We have no weapons, we have no sanctions, of course, that was not our aim, but we have rules, and we have the strength of the word, the independent observer, a military observer, or the SMM observers in eastern Ukraine, or in Ukraine in general, our election observers. They are our strongest fighters, and we use them in an impartial way. And we do not even require the principle of consensus, because the mandate for election monitoring has been decided upon in the OSCE. We do not have to ask all 57 member states before we go into a country. And the election reports we have prepared about Kazakhstan this year unfortunately, the relations with Macedonia were ended. All other plans in Belarus, in Russia, and the USA, and many other elections that are to follow will show and have shown that we have spent much time in the field of election monitoring. And the election reports we bring out prove this as well over the years. And thanks to the publication of reports, the civil society has the opportunity to insist in changes. Let me repeat, we cannot ensure that elections are run decently, but we can ensure that elections are monitored decently so that violations can be made public in the OSCE for all to see, and that they become a political issue. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the panel. Thank you for your attention during the last 1 hour and 45 minutes. Thank you for your contributions and your ideas. And now, on behalf of the hosts, I have the pleasure of inviting you to the 5th floor for a reception. You can use the staircase or the lift. Please do take use of this opportunity. You will miss something very nice. I think you are invited for a glass of mineral water or something. Thank you.